Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, a little information for you and the listeners. This is the trigger warning. We're going to be talking about dark and macabre things, anything from horror movies, horror culture, which could involve murder, rape, suicide, child abuse, offensive language. So if you're not prepared for that, maybe take a second guess, think about it and come back, or go listen to some boring shit, because we're going to talk about fucked up shit, which we think is fun.
Now that the...
I got the preamble or the warning done, and then like immediately went into the offensive language. I think that counts.
Vomit, yeah.
That counts. Today's guest is Mr. Arthur Cullipher, best known for his works in Found, Headless, Harvest Lake, as the special effects makeup on all of these, as well as playing the, I'm going to say lead role of Lawrence the Clown in The Bad Man. Awesome movie.
Actually, I think he was director of Headless.
Did you direct Headless too?
I was the director of Headless, yes. And
Jesus.
Worked on special effects, yeah.
And you were a scrotum alien.
I was a scrote. That is true. I didn't design those. Shane Beasley designed those, but I played it to the tits.
Or the balls, in this case.
Or the balls. Yeah.
Well, it was after the tits, so.
Well,
both were in the film.
Yeah.
Space Base, for our listeners. Space from outer space.
That movie actually won a Mr. Skin Award for the most bouncing titties on stage at one time.
I bet it did.
Yeah.
It was quite intentional at times. Like, this is just fun.
Yeah.
Because why not?
You know? Anyway, yes. Welcome, Arthur. Glad to have you. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. I'm doing all right today. How about you?
Not too bad.
Doing pretty well. So in this interview, we'll be asking 3 sets of questions covering your childhood, teenage years, and adulthood to find out what it is about horror that you like. Coming at it from multiple angles, of course, helps trigger memory sometimes that you'd forgotten about. But before we get into that, actually, I almost forgot. Did you want to pitch anything before we get into the interview?
Well, right now, I guess people can keep up with me on Instagram. It's Arthur L. Cullipher on Instagram. I do have a website, arthurcullipher.com, and an upcoming Etsy store, which is / Temple of the Doll.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
we'll put together a bio for you and get links and all that stuff. So starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Well, I mean, feels a little cliche at this point, but I like so many. The Exorcist is actually my first movie memory. You know,
okay. Like any movie.
The way that my house was laid out, the house I grew up in, we didn't have like a couch or chairs. We had a sort of recessed part of the floor that we referred to as the pit, and had a bunch of pillows down there so people could sit around and watch the TV or whatever. And I had a blanket, and it was early. My dad was an early adopter of VHS, of a VCR. We had one of those pretty early on in my memory.
Was it a top loader?
Yes, absolutely was. And so I remember them watching The Exorcist, and I had a blanket, and I kept pulling the blanket over my head, but then I'd peek back out, and there'd be Linda Blair's demon face, but that, I think it affected me most because my whole family went through phases. There was, macrame phase and a ceramics phase and all this kind of shit. And so my dad had made a bust of the devil, that is very cool. I still have it, and it had cubic zirconia for the eyes. And he had this thing set in his office, which his office had a big heavy door and was always dark, and he'd send me in there for something, and open this big heavy door, and the first thing that would happen is the light would fall on those cubic zirconia eyes, It coincided also with they were trying to get me to stop eating my boogers. And so,
gonna get you.
yeah.
Was it the devil will get you if you keep doing this kind of thing?
Well, I thought that was the reason. I thought that what was going to happen was that my boogers were slowly building a bust of Lucifer inside of me. And that if I keep eating them, then eventually it'll be complete and then I will be possessed. And
was that more of an inspiration to continue eating the boogers then? I wonder, how did you take that? Yes, Dark Lord, grow in my belly.
Grow in my belly. No, it was a deterrent.
Okay.
For sure, yeah. But they didn't ever specifically say that. I just developed that idea, I think, somewhere between The Exorcist and that devil head and eating the boogers, Although
childhood imagination.
I do remember them being a savory treat, but that was something that I stopped after that.
They are quite nice.
Just imagining a top end restaurant now.
It's nearly feasible.
Just the
on tonight's menu, we have a savory choice of either original post-construction work or sweat lodge boogers. Yes, the sweat lodge are marinated quite nicely.
We also have our high-end Gwyneth Paltrow goop straight from the source.
Are those vagina boogers?
Whatever. It's all about presentation, right? So,
right.
All right, so Exorcist, eating your boogers, devil head.
Yeah, there was. It's not necessarily about horror, but the thing that sort of really sparked my interest in special effects is I love animals and creatures. And before this particular film, I wanted to be like an astronaut or a scientist, so I could either make creatures or I could go visit them.
Okay.
But then I saw E.T. And I did not like the way that those scientists / astronauts, whatever I thought they were at the time, treated E.T.
Of course.
And so that kind of turned me off to that. But then I was like, how do I get one of those walking around my house? I want an ET friend to walk around, And so it was fortunate because a few years later, I found this makeup store called Paramount. And this woman, Madge, who was a great influence and really kind of helped me figure out what materials I need to be using and that sort of stuff. She's probably just making sales, but and so after I had seen E.T., I went with a friend to go to a video store where this doctor / astronaut was like carrying E.T. around. So it was like a public appearance of E.T. Right.
Oh, okay.
And so that was, amazing to me. And I loved, this creature that he had, and the eyes moved and the mouth moved, and, it was a big puppet sort of thing. Mm. And so after talking to this woman at Paramount, I actually got to meet the person who did that. And it was a special effects artist named Alan Duckworth. And I got to go to his house, and he sort of showed me some of the tricks of how he made eyes move and different stuff like that.
Cool. Did he live near you or something?
Yeah, well, so it was in Orlando, is where I grew up.
Okay.
And that's actually where I am again. But yeah, so it was over, Paramount was over near what was called the Fashion Square Mall. And it was just in this little strip mall. And so I would go there a lot of times, friends we would get to go to the mall, or we would get to go somewhere around that area. And that was where I spent a lot of time, especially as I was like, 11 or 12.
Were they fixed into or like keyed in on movie magic or special effects magic
No,
makeup, or it was all kinds of magic or all kinds of makeup?
I mean, it was a theatrical makeup company, so
Okay.
I mean, it's really intended for theater stuff. But she taught me about at the time one of the mold making materials was called moulage, which you melted down, came in chunks and whatever. And she taught me about latex and
Okay. So it wasn't like a normal women's makeup store with lipstick and that kind of stuff.
No.
Right.
Yeah, this was definitely. I mean, they had magic tricks in there and different masks and stuff that they sold. And
how did you find out about the store?
that's a good question. So I started early wanting to make movies. That's probably what led me to it, or to my parents to take me there, or it's possible. My Aunt Mona was an artist, and she did help me learn makeup around Halloween. Like she would do the kids' makeup and stuff, and I was would watch her and see what she was doing, and I wanted to be able to create these other effects, and so through that, I guess I don't remember if it was from Paramount or not, but I found out about dermal wax, or it was mortician's wax, but it was for theater nose putty, I guess is what they call it.
Okay,
I would make different cuts and gory little gouges and whatever to try and trick my friends or my mom, or
yes, dear.
And
pretend to be scared.
Say that again.
I said pretend to be scared. I'm thinking if you've ever seen the pictures or the GIFs online of the lioness, pretending to be scared when the little cub jumps on her, type of thing.
Right. Well, I think it bothered her more than that, because
when you started getting good at it, yeah,
right. I'm
just the first one or two.
Well, and definitely the kids at school. Of course, I don't know who thought I was fooling, but I made a wax finger and used a chicken bone and a piece of styrofoam for some gore on the end of it sticking out of it, and put a fake fingernail on it. And then I put a ring on it and put it in a ring box. And I said that I had proposed to this girl, and after I gave her the ring, she broke up with me. So I had to get the ring back.
Yeah, you got to get it back somehow,
right, exactly.
It's the implication.
And go ahead.
No, I'm just looking at the list of notes that I'm making about the childhood stuff. There's a lot here.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. It was something that I was a sickly child, and I had an adult case of walking pneumonia when I was in the first grade, and they gave me adult medicine for it, and it fucking corroded all of my teeth.
Ooh. And
I had to have a mouthful of silver growing up, caps on everything. Wow. And then, as my adult teeth came in, a lot of them came in hollow, without pulp, luckily without nerves a lot of the time. So that was a fortunate thing.
I was going to make a joke about it being early on the fronts campaign, but ouch, the follow-up to that was not just pleasant.
No, no, but yeah, I did. They called me Jaws, from the
yep.
James Bond thing. Mm-hmm. And
which actually, that's not too bad, because kids could have been very cruel about that. So to go with Jaws, that's actually, a positive thing.
Oh yeah, I wore it as a badge of honor. Yeah. I definitely did. But during that, that fever was my first bout of hallucination, and I saw a yellow. You know who Hotai is? Hotai is kind of like people get him confused with Buddha, but he's like the fat, laughing, bald.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Japanese, yeah. But my parents had several statues of different Asian styled people, and so that was probably one that they had, but it was one that it was just floating in the air there, laughing at me all yellow. And then he sort of dissipated, and then I saw these people in like pilgrim garb carrying me, but they were looking down at me, but the impression in my brain was that they were carrying me like I was in a coffin, like they were pallbearers, you know, and they were looking down at me very sternly, like I had done something very wrong. And it was actually my parents carrying me to the tub of ice to cool me down from the fever. But again, those are things that, you know, they stick with you.
Yeah. Yeah, especially at a young age and as traumatic as that is, yeah, those things stick with you in your mind.
So going back through the notes that I have here, you know, trying to pick out the emotions, because for me, you know, getting to the root of things really often deals with the emotions that were triggered by a lot of these different things. The two that I really, well, three that are popping out to me and the things that we've talked about, you mentioned anxiety, fear, arousal, but some of it, well, I guess curiosity maybe for the, when you got to the parts where you're talking about the makeup.
It's difficult, you know, so full disclosure, I listened to your show. So I have, you know, a couple of notes that I've written down, but I did want to keep this, you know, it's conversational to let it be, you know, organic and discover remembering these things naturally. But I don't.
So did you already come with the answers prepared?
Not
That's
exactly.
Cheating.
Yeah, it's cheating, right? No, I just am trying
to
a
couple things that you wanted to talk about.
Well, I'm trying to think of things that scared me, you know, more than I was just curious about them, or they created some sort of positive nostalgia.
Yeah, and it can often be about the experiences, and that's what I was thinking of next is, you know, if you've listened to the show, then you know some of the other questions that we normally ask. So let's talk about some of the other things that may have been experiences. For example, Halloween, favorite costume?
Oh man, Halloween. Jesus. So
you kind of touched on it earlier with the what was it, your mother was doing special effects makeup for people on Halloween, or not special effects, but like
my Aunt Mona, yeah. And well, so I was fortunate. My mother might tell you differently, but I feel like I was fortunate that my parents didn't really restrict my media intake. You know, my dad was very into horror movies, and so when he would watch them, I got to watch them, and that's just, you know, how it was. And something that was very big, again, because there's so many of these little interconnected things that I've spent a lot of time analyzing myself. People tell me I need a therapist, and it's like, I've got a mirror. What, you know, I don't know if I need that. But my dad took me to a garage sale. He loved garage sales, and I fucking hated garage sales, the way that he would go to, you know, this one and that one, and just spend so long over boring nothing. And then he found this one, and the three things that I was able to take away from that garage sale was were a werewolf mask, a latex werewolf mask, a copy of Fangoria, which was had no cover, but was my first introduction to the Sender and Q, and I think even Goulardi, you know, as a horror host. You know, it was my introduction to a lot of stuff, and a copy of the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft and Demonology.
Okay, at a yard sale. Nice.
At a yard sale, yeah. And so those three things severely influenced me, you know.
Especially that last one, I can imagine.
Oh yes. Well, it had all sorts of illustrations from the Dictionnaire Infernal in it. So like the standard illustrations of demons that you see, which is mostly like from the Goetia, you know, that are like amalgam creatures with horse heads and, you know, three different animals stuck together, and
basically a D&D book.
basically a D&D book. Yeah, once I got the monster manual, there were a lot of similarities.
Uh-huh. That's cool, though. It's, full disclosure, I have been perusing your website and very interested in the what the hell are you talking about or ruminations on new demonology article. So
thank you.
got into the demonology quite early then, huh?
I did. Well, and as we go on, my connections to what would be considered in the social construct as fictional things. I don't know. I've just never been comfortable being human.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's not something that I really ever cared for or identified with. It's not entirely true. Like I was telling you earlier about my cousins, Paula and Daniel. So Paula is a girl, obviously, and she is 2 years older than me, and Daniel is 2 years younger than me. And so we'd go to play something like Scooby-Doo or Captain Caveman or, whatever was about at that time, Star Wars. And the thing is that I always wanted to be the pretty girl. Okay. I have never thought that girls were icky. I never had that. I've always been like girls, and so much so that like I wanted to be that. I thought that was an awesome thing, and but Paula was the pretty girl, so she got to be the pretty girl, and I didn't want to be like
jealousy.
Yeah, I did. I definitely. Well, and some of my family was understanding of that. I'll tell you that in a second. But like, I wasn't the hero. Like I thought Luke Skywalker was boring.
Okay.
I thought that Fred was boring. Not that Fred was the hero, but you get the idea.
Right.
And so it kind of left me in this place where the next move for me was the villain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I ended up playing a lot, was the villain or the monster or the thing like that. But I did, my grandmother was very understanding. So she had made, well, when I was in kindergarten, there were all of these like inflatable letter people that they had, which I just adored, but you couldn't purchase them as a normal person who wasn't part of a school or whatever. And so she made me the letter people, and I still have all of those like stuffed animals.
Huh.
But then she made a Wonder Woman set of bracelets and the tiara for my cousin Paula. And I was so jealous, not to the point of like being shitty about it or anything, but she knew. And so she also made me a set of bracelets. And so
nice. That was nice of her.
Yeah, it was very nice of her. Very pleased with that.
So we were talking about different things, and then you brought this up. I'm curious, why did you bring it up?
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think we got
my grandma. My grandma. Halloween. So through that, in the same silver material that she made the bracelets out of, I made a silver cloak out of for this like alien costume that was probably one of my favorites. I made the mask for it. I think that was, again, I want to say like 5th or 6th grade, somewhere in there. Halloween was always something that was very important to me. I went through the gamut of the different like plastic costumes, had the Yoda costume, which I was very pleased with because I loved Yoda. But right at that same time, my grandmother was dying of cancer, and she was the only one. I was the only one that she let see her without her wig, and I thought that she looked beautiful, but I thought that she looked like Yoda, and so I couldn't tell her that she looked like Yoda, but I told her she looked beautiful, And it's a story that other family members remember, but they don't know that I thought she looked like Yoda, and that was why.
Actually, that brings up a point that I did want to go back to. You had mentioned you never felt comfortable being human. Is there any reason why you wanted to be something else?
That's a really good question. I don't entirely know the answer to it. All of my like toys that I wanted the girl dolls and the monsters and girls throughout, that. And I didn't really have a lot of interest in human men. I'm not exactly sure what that was about necessarily, but I mean, even growing up, I had, friends who were boys. And like I said, my cousin and stuff, other kids in the neighborhood, but I definitely preferred the company of the girls in the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and scaring them, I guess.
As one does.
As one does, yeah.
No, I think I might be able to field a hypothetical potential answer to that question, in the fact that it's just the generic rebellious state of the fact that, especially growing up in the 80s, so much of the norm was men and heroes, and the Freds and the He-Men and the archetype of the man that is the hero and always does the good thing. And it's just a kind of a natural reaction, if you have a rebellious nature, to go against that and be like, all right, well, what about the other ones? What about the women and the villain and the monsters?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting take on that.
For me, my dad was on the road a lot, and so I was always being taken care of mainly by either my grandmother or stepmothers or some woman in my life. And I was always getting in trouble because I was being a kid doing what kids do. And, when dad would call home, find out I was getting in trouble, and he'd say things, about, just make him happy, make grandma happy, make my stepmother happy, do whatever to make him happy. And I guess on some deep level, I've never really had quite as much interest in what other men think or feel or want, because to me, making a woman happy is the greatest thing in my life. And who knows what a woman wants but a woman? Like, why should I listen to you when you don't know what they want? Like, there's just some logic here that goes, I don't care what you think or feel or what you want, because you're not the one I care about impressing or pleasing.
Oh yeah, you are definitely hitting the nail on the head as far as that goes. Because I was raised primarily by women. My dad was not around a lot, and when he was around, there are definitely aspects and things that he contributed to my mental processes, but he would do things like come home fucking blackout drunk and want to teach me to fight and end up knocking me into the wall, the rocks and stuff. It was very little. He didn't mean to. He wasn't abusive, but he had his moments where he thought he was doing the right thing, and I ended up getting hurt. And then there was a lot of always wanting to please the women around me. And they certainly did a lot to please me. My grandmother, again, teaching me to make dolls and making dolls and making costumes and things like that. My Aunt Mona teaching me about makeup and special effects and costumes. And even my mother, who, bless her, she's never been like a horror fan or anything like that, but there was a show, maybe you guys are old enough to remember this. There was a show that was just a pilot called Wishman, and what's her face from Terminator,
Linda
Hamilton, yeah, was in that. Anyway, but it was like some very poorly described mixture of it's a mixture of DNA and cell tissue, and we grew this little alien kid, anyway, but so I loved that little creature of Wishman. And my mother, who had been making pantyhose pigs, so like you sew stuffed pantyhose and sew it into a face little pig, and then you put that in a jar of beans, and then that's like a pin cushion
Mhm.
You know, they put a pincushion top on. Anyway, point being is that she taught me that technique, and we made a soda Wishman head onto a headless Howdy Doody body. But yeah, so I mean, again, that was something that I was supported by them, and I was supported. Yeah, like I made construction paper versions of the almost construction paper marionettes of the different creatures from like Dark Crystal. And my mother and I think my Aunt Mona lived with us at the time. Both, you know, helped me trace out the shapes and whatever. I did want to bring this up. This was something that did scare me as a child, is the tritone. So like you are trying to call somebody and you get the wrong number. And it's the boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that.
We're sorry. The number you have dialed has been disconnected, you know. That voice and that noise just really let you know you are alone.
Yeah.
There's no one there to reach out. You know, it was that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, you know. I still think that's scary.
The first thing that comes to mind when I hear that voice is always, what was it, THX 1137 or
1138?
1138, yeah. So maybe I got to ask, in that voice affecting you that early on, did you maybe see THX later on, and that if you feel you are not properly sedated, like that, was that voice creepy as hell? Because it creeped me out just by itself.
I think that movie is creepy as hell, and I love
the whole thing is, yes.
I love Ohm. It's like, my time is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. And I look at a lot of these things like that, you know, trying to review your own fears as to how can I give this to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
So if in making movies and making horror movies, it's like, what's your inspiration? What are you drawing from? And I want to draw from the things that frighten me or that disturb me or bother me, you know, so that I can give the audience something authentic. Plus, it's like, you know, you have to go with what's in your wheelhouse.
Right. It was the giving you part that threw me off for a second, but I see what you mean now about, you know, authentic experience and relating that.
Well, I mean, that's something that I strive for / struggle with, is being able to give someone my love for these things. You know, I have a friend who is very much into like the MST3K versions of a lot of the movies that I love all by themselves, unironically. And I can't give him the nostalgia of being up late with horror hosts or watching something that you're maybe not supposed to be watching, or that you know, you're not supposed to be up that late. And just the feelings that those things give you, that nostalgia, I want to be able to package that and give it to someone else, you know, because it's so precious to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, certain things are hard to package, especially emotions, and especially ones that don't require conversation too.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to teenage years. What were some of your, you know, the scariest stories and books and movies that influenced you in your teenage years?
Well, so my parents also got divorced. I remember hearing that over the phone. Do you remember the Sectors? No, they were insect people, He-Man type of stuff, you know. And there was a big playset called The Hive, and it was one of the coolest playsets ever devised. And I had that, and I was playing, and I overheard my mom talking to my Aunt Kathy or somebody that they were getting divorced, and that, of course, threw me, you know, was very frightening that was happening, but I still didn't really understand it until later. That was coinciding with me getting into Dungeons and Dragons, having the Monster Manual, reading Lovecraft, reading Edgar Allan Poe, reading Stephen King, Night Shift, I loved the Boogeyman. Is a big influence on that. And that the movie that I was talking about, animatronics, later shifted into something else that starred the Boogeyman. But I'm ashamed to say this, but in the story, he was called TB Man, like T period B period. Anyway,
no, I get it. That's like his human name. That's his Clark Kent.
That's his Clark Kent, TB Man. Yeah, yeah. I was very into. They had some horror Scholastic type books when the bookmobile type thing would come around, and or you'd order. There was one that was similar to Deadly Friend, but was with this girl that like just became obsessed with this guy, and she was pale skinned and wore purple lipstick, and I wanted to be pale skinned and wear purple lipstick, but something about that image and coinciding with this other book called Unnatural Talent, where this guy made a deal with again a female demon to be a basketball player, but then later he was becoming a demon, and something that affected me, and that was this turn of phrase that he looked in the mirror and he saw his face had changed into a more insectoid or demonic aspect, but then there were sores that had ribbons of pus flowing through them, and there's ribbons of pus.
Nice.
Something, yeah, nice, right? Yeah. But this was also coming along with, I had braces, but then I was, getting ready to drop the braces, and as I was getting ready to drop the braces, I'm getting all kinds of zits, and
perfect timing, right? You trade one for the other.
Perfect timing, yeah. So definitely a lot of body horror, in actual life.
Yeah.
Right.
Because my acne became very severe on my back and my neck and chest, and so I ended up taking Accutane, which is a
acne medication.
Yeah, it's a very strong acne medication that makes you super sensitive to the sun, gives you a liver like you've been drinking for 30 years, makes you peel all over the place, and
guessing they didn't have tetracycline at this phase.
So they did, it just didn't work
Oh.
for me. So we tried this Accutane, and then I would have to go to the dermatologist and have these boils. Like, have you ever seen like a blackhead popper? Looks like a little tiny spoon with a hole in the bottom of it. Well, the doctor had one, and it had little razors on it. And so he would take these boils and he would kind of cut them open with this razor spoon, and then get the stuff out of there, and then have to go back and inject them with cortisone. And, I had to stay out of the sun. But I had moved from being kind of a heavy kid into, a skinnier kid. And so somewhere along the line, I had a girlfriend who thought that I was a vampire, or maybe I really was in trying to make her think that. And so that sort of started to stick. I have to stay out of the sun. I'm, my teeth are weird, and, I'm some type of ghoul thing, And then, of course, as my mom and dad are divorced, now I have to go spend weekends with my dad. And what he would do is, of course, this is the video store heyday. So he would take me to the video store and let me rent whatever the hell I wanted to rent, and then set me in a room with my movies for the weekend. And then he would go and do whatever the fuck he was doing. So that's where I ended up watching a lot of horror movies. But, the vampire thing really sort of stuck. And I didn't have like zits all over my face necessarily, but, one or two, but they were more on my chest and back. So it was something hidden. So I didn't, take off my shirt much. But, go ahead.
I was just going to say that also kind of lends itself to the whole vampire thing, just further distancing yourself from, and stop me if I'm projecting here, but, further distancing yourself from being accepted or falling into that regular person model because you've got like a secret almost, because it's covered up all the time.
Yeah, that was definitely there.
So teenage years.
Mhm.
I'm guessing you still participated in Halloween at that point. A favorite costume in your teenage years?
I got into theater a little bit in high school, but I was already a metalhead / moving into goth kid, so had a lot of criticism from that and from the things that I would wear and makeup I would wear and whatever.
Oh yeah.
But I got into theater a little bit nearing the end of high school. I mean, I had been in all sorts of plays and things throughout elementary school, but then that kind of went away in middle school and kind of came back around in my sophomore year. And I had a friend that I had had since 6th grade, but we had kind of drifted apart, and she came back to me around 10th grade and started taking me to Rocky Horror.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I went to that, I was kind of irritated because everybody's yelling and throwing things and running around, and I'm like, I want to watch.
I want to see the movie.
Shh, you're ruining the movie. Sit down.
Right.
I'm sure that would have been hilarious. I kind of want to go to a local play of Rocky Horror now and just be that asshole. Like,
trying to watch the movie. But anyway, continue.
But I loved it, and I went there 1 year dressed as, Halloween was approaching, and I went dressed as Alex from Clockwork Orange.
Oh, nice.
And met a girl who then, of course, was very into thinking that I was a vampire. And so that...
Is this the same one that you mentioned earlier or a different one?
No, different one. Okay. Yeah.
Just clarifying. No,
but no, it was something that started developing in me around the time that I was probably 14, 15. Mm-hmm. And then by this point, I'm like 16, 17, you know, so it just became more and more of that. But there were aspects to it that made it seem like there was something other there. And that's something that, again, is recurring, this idea of the other, the possessive force or being that would make me be something else, or that wants me to be something else. So that's something that, as I got older, I mean, let's be real. The hugest part of it was, oh, wait, vampires are sexy to girls. Mm-hmm. Girls want to have sex with someone they think is a vampire, right? So it was largely about that, but mostly about how can I, this kid who always loved girls and had girlfriends, from a very young age, but then went through a phase of feeling unloved between getting fat, braces, divorce, acne, all this stuff. And I come back around to now, and through all that, I still had friends who were girls, but I didn't have girlfriends, And so now I was coming back around to this, I've stumbled onto something here that is going to get me laid.
Maybe.
But it worked a lot more often than it didn't. So
you're like, I wanted to be like this anyway. The sex is just a bonus.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. And there's, this negation of the fear of death.
What do you mean?
Well,
with vampire, I mean, I know what you mean in terms of vampires, but how does this relate to?
It's all sorts of death, be it the death of my parents' marriage or the death of my grandmother, or, these things happening. It was like suddenly things were ending. How do I preserve this? And so, I mean, when I say I went full force into it, I mean, I believed I was a vampire. It wasn't just, it was something I was using for sex and all that, but I kind of became, just so you know, vampires are assholes.
Well, yeah.
So
they're old. They've been around a while. They've seen a lot of shit.
Yeah, and they don't
tired.
care. They don't care about your feelings, you know? And so I had no issue, getting with this girl and then screwing around on her with this other girl and then screwing around on her with this other girl and whatever. And that involved partly, blood drinking and stuff like that.
I was going to ask, did you actually drink blood?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. No, I definitely did. I claimed to kill some animals in order to drink their blood, but I never did that.
Yeah.
But I definitely, drank blood from the various girls that I was with.
If it gets you laid.
Yeah, at the time, it's weird, man. The goth culture was real strange.
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's weird that a girl would want to sleep with you after having said that you killed animals. But go ahead.
Yeah,
That's hot.
That's hot. Well, you
got issues. Go ahead.
You kill a cat, you drink cat blood, you get cat powers. Now you're like a cat, so that's sexy, right?
I'm
Yeah,
sure
that's
there's a
how you turn
song or
it.
a rhyme in there somewhere.
Somewhere. But yeah, so and I think about that a lot as far as.
Sorry, I'm just in the back of my head. I'm still going on that, and now it's to the tune of Stray Cat Street.
With my tail in the air, man.
Stray Cat powers. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Hey, all the ladies say you're a real dark guy. So
that was just too fitting.
But
where were we going with this?
What's that?
I said, where were we going with this?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think that part of the point was that because I'm definitely telling you weird things, but also the cheesy aspects of myself is that at this point I was trying to think of like what scared me with all this crazy vampire shit I was doing. Because I was the knight. I was.
No, it doesn't.
I was the one who knocked.
Right,
exactly. So I wasn't as concerned about that. I was a little concerned with going mad. I talked to myself in the mirror a lot, and the thing looking back at me from the mirror definitely had a more sinister aspect than I felt like I did. But they're just the things that I was afraid of was largely like getting caught doing something through my teenage years. Until
that's the conscious. Well, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say basically until I had my son later in my 20s, which I still consider to be part of my teenage years. And then everything moved from dreams about monsters and things chasing me and whatever to something was going to happen to him. And that was the nightmare, But I got out of the vampire phase basically when I went to jail for the first time for an extended period. And suddenly it was like, there were no girls in the jail they put me in. So
like there would have been in another jail?
Yeah, I don't know. But definitely nobody to impress, nobody's blood I wanted to drink, nobody's...
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah. So that really kind of broke that.
What I was going to say a minute ago is you were talking about your conscious fears, but you also raised subconscious fears earlier than that in your statement about vampires defying death and, the death of the marriage and your grandmother's death and things like that. It sounds like there's some fears there, just maybe not conscious ones.
For sure. I mean, it's something that I obsessed over. That's not to say that I didn't have moments of being disturbed or being frightened, but what I was disturbed and frightened by a lot of times is sort of difficult to put into words, difficult to describe to somebody else, to bring back to you. It was, a lot of thoughts on decay and pain caused to children. I have this thing in me that, like, if I hurt your feelings, I think about you as a little kid being hurt. Right? Like,
I'm curious. Sorry, I'm curious. Did that come up after your son was born, or before, or like has it always been a thing?
No, it's always been a thing. My mom did that to me when I was very young. I had a toy of some sort that I played with all the time. And then I got a new toy and I played with the new toy more. And my mom said, "Aren't you afraid you're going to hurt the old toy's feelings?"
Mm-hmm.
Boom. That was it forever. Sympathy for things, thinking about, having that guilt, that was a serious moment,
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of this. It's kind of the same way. Like early on, I think in my situation that kind of gave me a subconscious fear of disappointing people. But yeah, it's like hurting someone's feelings is more bad, for lack of a better term, is worse than actually viscerally physically hurting them. Like what was it, that cannibal case where the guy invited someone?
Not that the second wouldn't do the first, but go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe not. Maybe if they want to be physically harmed, then you're not hurting their feelings. You're doing quite the opposite. Eh?
Right.
Yeah, and there's something that's, just so much more fun in a horror movie if you're not getting their emotional response to it.
Mm-hmm.
You're just killing somebody, picking them apart, they're screaming and whatever. But
I was just going to say, I'm thinking the scream's a response, an emotional response.
It is, but it's not oh, how come you're doing this to me?
Right.
It's not, what I mean?
It's a response, but it's not the one that triggers you.
Right. It's there's something the films that disturb me more are the ones where there's that emotional response where it's, it's sad that this is happening. But I don't watch those films over and over. I'll watch it once, but it's just not fun.
Yeah. Like, what was it? Girl Next Door. Especially because that's based on a true story. That one.
Yeah.
It's like the betrayal, like a girl who was invited in to hang out with neighborhood friends and then just flipped. Torture.
And that, I think, is a huge one of my fears, is betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I've had a lot of in my life and struggled with. And particularly betrayal from women is a disturbance for me,
So I'm looking through, the questions we normally ask, and, sometimes we ask, for this portion of your life, did horror make you happy? And I'm looking back between the notes I've taken here and the notes I've taken for the childhood. It looks like, childhood, there were elements of horror that made you happy. And then now it's more of the angsty part, which is not uncommon.
Yeah, this is
commenting.
Well, I think that something that when I was a kid, I was very creative and artistic. And moving into my teenage years, it became, all drugs and girls. So my only real art was my vampire drag, I think I was trying to write some sort of vampire Bible or whatever. I had girlfriends who were into witchcraft, but kind of more on the new agey side. And I kind of was thinking that was bullshit. So I'm like, well, where's the religion that's for me, as a vampire? And this is before any of that stuff was really around. But yeah, there was a lot of horror at that point that did make me happy. I was very into watching every vampire film I could get a hold of. I loved Near Dark.
Mm-hmm.
The Bram Stoker's Dracula came out about that time, and I thought that thing was fucking hilarious.
Oh, well, speaking of hilarious in vampire movies, I think it was around that same time. Had you seen Vampires Kiss?
I didn't see that until later.
Yeah, same here. Like, I always wondered what it would have been like seeing it as it came out at the time. But everyone I know, and myself included, it's like a cult following now. And it's seeing it after the fact, where it's been sensationalized by the meme, of course.
Yeah, and I love Nicolas Cage.
You don't say.
But I do wonder if that would have, held up a mirror.
Yeah,
to me,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, especially if you were in this whole situation where you started to slowly more and more believe that you were a vampire. That's a great phrase for it. Hold up a mirror. Like, is that maybe a little bit what I'm being right now?
Yeah, because I had seen Martin.
Well, I mean, if you're a vampire, you wouldn't be able to see it yourself.
See, and that's true. I got around that, like in the, Vampire Lies, I guess, was like, well, if you're a vampire, how come we can see in the mirror? Well, I can't see myself. You can see me. Meanwhile. But there was something I was going to say about that. Yeah, Nightmare Before Christmas actually really held up a mirror in that respect for me.
How so?
Near that time. Well, I saw it the first time on acid.
Nice.
And yeah, and it was amazing, but it was also a way darker and more twisted thing than it actually is. Like when I experienced it.
Well, I mean, they kidnapped Santa Claus. What the fuck?
Yeah. Well, it was more at the time, like I identified with Jack.
Okay.
But it was pointing out the fallacies of what he was doing. And I still I hold that film in extremely high regard. Definitely feel that is sort of a movie version of the shaman's journey.
The hero's
journey? Like Lotus Feet of Clay, where the mystic goes to the other realm and they find something precious and they try to bring it back. But once they bring it back, they find themselves without the words to describe their experience to other people. And the people think they understand.
Right.
So you sort of morph that version into, oh, this is what you think you understand. So I'm still going to try to bring you this, but I'm going to do it through this lens of
allegory.
Yeah, I am the one who is, bringing this back. So I still, am going to get the credit for it. Right. So even though it is a corruption of what I actually experienced, now I'm giving this to you so that I have power over you, and I think that that's definitely something that movie is, because he goes into Christmas land and he comes back and he can't explain it and they think they know what it is. And so he kind of turns it into Halloween as Christmas land, but that's not right. That's not what it is, But anyway, that for whatever reason, it was very like you think you're the shit, but you ain't the shit, and that bothered me because I thought I was the shit.
Of course. So is there anything else related to the teenage years that you think is relative to what you enjoy about horror that we haven't talked about before we jump to the adult years?
Any real life terrifying experiences? I don't know if we covered that one yet.
Oh yeah, geez. I'll tell you about some of my early paranormal stuff.
Okay.
I was when I was about 17, that same girlfriend who I was initially trying to impress with the vampire dealio. I was on the phone with her one night and I'm laying in my bed and it's dark in the room. It's difficult to just describe to you the layout of my room, but on one side of the room was the door out into the house and the other side of the room was the door leading to the laundry room, which also had a door leading out of the house. And so I looked over at my stereo because I thought that there was a light there. When I looked at it full on, there wasn't a light there, but then I started noticing like smoke coming in from under the door in the laundry room. And the first thought is like, oh God, is the house on fire? And, but then I watched it for a minute and I'm describing this and it comes out and kind of, settles at the foot of my bed and begins to form, like a definite head and shoulders shape. Like it's a person or a ghost of some sort. And I'm just staring at it, watching this and describing it to her. And then all of a sudden it rushed me and it was like, air was coming out of every pore in my body where it just, and then it was gone. That was it. And of course I'm like trying to rationalize that. What was it? Yeah. But, I don't know. It definitely led to a concern, or rather, just further fascination with what might be after here. Mm-hmm. I always had a thing for, ghosts were prevalent in my reading and my my movie watching, but I hadn't actually experienced one like that. And I still don't know if I would call it a ghost because I never, wasn't connected to any person living or dead. My dad built that house, so there wasn't any like history with it or anything. But there's still the joke that I think America is cursed. It's like the whole place was built on top of some ancient Indian burial ground or something.
It kind of was, yeah.
Hence the joke.
So I don't know about any of that, but definitely started making me, more concerned with what comes after here. And I already was, with the visiting the various churches and things like that. So I don't know. I loved the book Lost Souls by Poppy Z. Brite, which introduced me to chartreuse, which is still my favorite liquor.
I've actually got him on my Facebook. I've been trying to message him about being a guest on our show, but he has not replied yet.
Is he a he now?
I believe so, and that's how I've been referring to him because I guess that's, been my first introduction. But I wondered if there had been a transition.
Well, when I met Poppy Z. Brite, or didn't meet her, but she was a she, and then she did an introduction to The Nightmare Factory by Thomas Ligotti, which Thomas Ligotti, that's my favorite probably. But I thought I had heard something about a transition, so I don't. But that would be great, man, if you can get Poppy Z. Brite.
What did you like about Lost Souls?
Kind of the same thing that I liked about Near Dark was the idea of nomadic vampires, that didn't necessarily, just weren't going to play by the rules. They filed their teeth down and drank a lot and did a lot of drugs and ate a lot of sweets and just carousing around, and then they'd pick up somebody and drink all their blood and kill them and drop them off somewhere and head on to the next town,
What is there something about creating art that is important to you? What speaks to you about that?
There is only art and nothing.
I like that.
It is, I don't know the words for it, but that link to the creator, that having that power. There's something about it only existed in the ether beforehand, and now you've used the imagination to capture it,
to manifest it into physical form.
And now you're going to manifest it into a physical form. That's right. That's magic. Everything that you see that is man-made started off in someone's imagination. It didn't exist until they brought it here. And I think that my imagination is as good, if not better, than many. So, I want to bring my things here, but also, just to be able to share them with you.
Is this why? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to express myself and to help you feel the way that I have felt and enjoyed feeling. I don't always have the words to describe that to someone, and even if I did, you still wouldn't know what I was talking about really in a conceptual way you would. Are
you familiar with Joseph Campbell?
Somewhat, yes.
Okay. In one of his interviews, he was quoting somebody else who said this, a quote that he said that he really liked was, we talk about the third best things because the first best things, there are no thoughts that you can even think about them. You can't even properly think about them. The second best things are the things that you can think about, but you lack the words to express them. And so the third best are the things that you can think about and can express them. And those are the things that we talk about.
Yeah. That's
final draft, if you will.
Maybe, I guess.
The edited version.
Yeah. From the thought process. There's the raw that you can't describe. There's.
Yeah. Well, until you kind of took a turn on me there at the end, no, it's okay. The thing about sharing your reality and those kinds of things, I can see the point you're making there. Before you said that, I was about to ask if that was why you were afraid of something happening to your son, because you were talking about things about, only existed in the ether and until it was created and blah, blah, blah. And so for a moment there, I thought maybe I saw a tie with that. But then, like I said, you went into a different direction.
Well, and I mean, that's definitely, he is definitely something that happened in that way. But once he was born, that's when my dreams started to turn to someone was going to kidnap him. Something was going to happen to him. He was going to fall. He was going to get hurt. He was going to, any of those things. And that became the major source of my fear for a good number of years. But I found that, like, when he was a baby, I couldn't watch horror movies that had anything happening to babies.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
And as he got older, whatever year he was, I couldn't watch a horror movie that was about something bad happening to that, age.
Okay. How old were you when he was born?
26.
Okay. So I'd put that more down in the adult stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of adult stuff, what kind of stuff impacted you in your adult life? Movies, books?
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
Dealing with the with everything that we've talked about before, and I mean, I didn't even get into half the things that I was.
Is there something you specifically wanted to talk about?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's necessarily that it's relevant or that won't come out as we continue talking about it.
Okay.
But it wasn't until probably in 97 I started trying to make a tentacled creature, a tentacled person, kind of Cthulhu-like. And then in 98, I modified that. And I, instead of, like, the first time I had used like ropes and latex and tape and things like that. But then this time around, I used fishing lures, which were specifically culprit fishing lures. And they were these black and gold worms that I used as tentacles, and they didn't stick to latex. So I had to, like, sew them onto pieces of fabric and then latex that. And anyway, the point is that I ended up writing a story about Culprit that was a sort of a take on, like, Hansel and Gretel. And then Culprit became Dr. Calamari, which was my horror host character. While I would admit I was him, he would never admit he was me. But so, it starts as a Halloween costume, and then I bring it into some sort of character or artwork that I'm doing. I did, I dressed as the Ragman one year, and then Ragman became a spirit character in a short film I did called The Adipsir Child and stuff. So it became something to where, like, I was almost kind of trying it out,
So now for you, the joy with Halloween is getting to invent things or?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree. And then later it was just dressing as a more true version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I couldn't just walk around in all year.
We have jumped around a lot, but one thing that you mentioned early on that I wanted to see if there was something that tied back to it was your statement that not wanting to be human, wanting to be something else. And I think there was another phrase you said of a possessive force that wants you to be something else.
So in my, moving through the vampire phase, that wasn't something that, it was something that became, very real to me for a time until I realized what an asshole I was being, treating people kind of shittier than I wanted to, or than I was, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to be a badass and not be an asshole in some respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that was what it seemed like. So, but, I still had this incredible ego that I was trying to figure out what that was about. So, okay, vampires aren't going to work. What about magic? maybe I can be a witch. I can be a wizard, sorcerer, or something of that nature. So I kind of went back to those thoughts, which I had from childhood. Of course, I had tried to, make potions and cast spells and things like that as a child. But now let's get a little more serious about it. Let's try to figure out if this is a thing that we can actually do. And so moving into reading a lot of books on magic and various religions and trying to figure out, getting into chaos magic and
let me go back to what I had asked before and try to relate the two things that I'm seeing here. I had asked about a statement you made earlier about not wanting to be human or not feeling human, and the conversation in response has been more about the journey of, okay, I'm not that, so what am I? Mm-hmm. And I'm wanting to go back and talk about the feeling of just not feeling like you're human, or I'm losing my verbiage.
Well, and it's easy to do. I think that I've always felt alien. Mm-hmm. Like I just wasn't like other people. And I think that is to some degree true. Obviously not in a lot of biological senses, but just in general, the ways that I have viewed the world and tried to share that with other people or speak to other people about it. A lot of times, it's a look at like, what the fuck are you talking about? And the idea, I guess, of, I don't want to grow up, ain't nothing out there but sad and gloom. Good old Tom Waits. But, the things that I saw growing up from the adults around me, while they were, half of it was inspiring and motivating, the other half of it was, I don't ever want to be like that, Mm. So it's an amalgam of things, that says you should be something else. And plus, humans, they're all over the place. They're so common. It's not like a monster, who's got some unique aspect to it.
Well, wanting to be different, I think, is slightly different. You've probably heard us talk on other calls about, identifying with something, and then at a certain point in child development, wanting to identify yourself as not being like the thing that you previously identified with. So there's the struggle between wanting to be a part of something, but also maintain your own identity and be separate from it. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like what you're talking about happened even earlier than that type of dilemma comes up. Like if you're talking about, maybe feeling like you didn't, like you weren't human at 3 or 4, like that's a decade before the kind of thing we're talking about there.
Sure.
That's where I wanted to talk some more about that and see if we could try to see where, I don't know, about seeing where that came from, because it might be too early to relate to any particular incident.
Yeah, it might be. I'm not sure. I mean, I can, I do a lot of self-examination. So I can look back and say, well, maybe it was because I was, into girls and my friends around me were not, girls were icky, maybe it's that, I developed a sense of not wanting to be common, of wanting to stand out. That's definitely, part of my theatrical nature,
Well, and now that you mention it, I guess it is possible for a kid, even at that early of an age, to want to be different. So you mentioned in your adult years, your fears had turned more towards things related to your son. Other than ones relating to your son, were there any other new fears that cropped up?
What comes after this, if anything? Because like one of the scariest things I can think of is just stopping.
Right.
I don't really want that.
Yeah.
And
no
so,
one does. I mean, it's a funny situation too, because you wouldn't endure any pain or hardship if you do just stop, but it's still a terrifying thing to think of because you simply don't want it.
I've got far too much of an ego for that.
Exactly.
Well, I am certainly important somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I mean, I could see that being the issue for you. I mean, for me, it's just, as terrible as life is, there are definitely things about it I enjoy. And even if you take away all the bad things, it's still a net loss for me because of all the things I do enjoy. So,
but you wouldn't have to worry about enjoying them if you didn't exist.
I know I'm not going to care about it, but I care about it now.
Well, and then there are those thoughts, like the thoughts that, the Gnostics thought that what people consider God is a demiurge, and that the true face of God is nothing.
Right.
The great nothingness before, and that this thing, whatever it is, has captured unlimited potential and limited it.
Well, that goes back to the quote I mentioned earlier from Joseph Campbell. It's the third best things are the things we talk about.
Yeah. And that's us. We are the third best things, I guess.
that too, in that sense.
But that, the idea that the thing that created you might not necessarily have your best interest at heart.
Or anyone's.
And that's what I love about Thomas Ligotti. When I, talk about that, Thomas Ligotti is a huge influence on me and my whole interior makeup at this point, because it's this idea that, maybe the whole point of creation is to watch it fall into decay. This idea that when you see an abandoned something, you have a sense of the sacred and the holy more so than in any place where there is a heavy population of people.
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is for some people. For me, seeing something that's old and abandoned and things like that, it's about respect for the loss. I mean, it's recognizing and my own mortality and understanding this will be me someday.
But
this is a metaphor for me.
But do you look at that and in your brain bring the people back, bring the good times back, bring the carnival back?
Yeah.
Or do you
to know that it's all going to be gone someday? That, like I said, it's still a metaphor for my life.
Yeah. And I think that the idea that there is an end, or rather that you could be extinguished wholly on a what you might consider a soul level, that after here maybe there is something, but again it's like you're being dropped into an ocean by yourself.
So I'm looking back, through the things that we've talked about now, trying to see, what common threads.
How the hell am I going to edit this?
I mean, we're at 3 hours, so there's going to be large sections cut out. So there's just no way around that. Other than vampires, do you see any other common threads that have, been a part of your life through the whole, all three phases?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's largely about art and magic, about wanting to, like you said, put something permanent.
So the common theme then that we were talking about, thinking about, afterlives, is that where that ties in?
Maybe so, because it's always been a concern.
What's your favorite movie, and what movie have you watched more times than any other? Or in your case, maybe books, I should ask, because you've read a lot of books.
Yeah. I definitely will say that even though Thomas Ligotti is, I kind of view it as like Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, Thomas Ligotti is kind of the modern guy for that. But I would say that the scariest book that I have ever read is House of Leaves. It's a book from I think 2000, Mark C. Danielewski, and you could spend years reading this book. But as far as favorite, like, I can't say that I have, it's un-American to go on, looking after this number one, quote unquote, the best. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. I love Videodrome.
It's a good one.
I'm a big fan of like Scarecrows, The Child, Halloween 3, specifically Halloween 3.
Which movie or book have you read or watched more than any other?
It's got to be a tie between Gremlins and Nightmare Before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Gremlins, like I said, my grandpa gave me the video cassette, the bootleg, and I got sick and watched it, mostly again trying to figure out, how did they do this? How can I do this? Nightmare Before Christmas, again, I saw that, and it was not nearly as fucked up as I made it in my brain, from the first time. So I wanted to go back and see it again. And then it was at, the Dollar Theater. So we went like every night. But I have a huge love for stop motion and dolls and tiny figures, and figuring out how to do that. That was a natural thing. It's like, of course you were going to love this.
Okay. Do you see any common threads about what kind of horror you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
Monsters, or little monsters, little creatures, but any monster, really.
You mentioned now a few times specifically little monsters. What is it about little monsters opposed to others that is interesting to you?
Being able to have one of these creatures as a pet, like being able to have a mogwai as a pet, or even a gremlin, But there's the one aspect, like I said, of being able to have that type of little thing as a friend. But then you flip that, and there's sort of the betrayal. I don't entirely know, but I know that that's something that I want to do. So like, I have several stories that involve small creatures or dolls or, little things turning against you.
Okay. So that kind of goes back to the betrayal thing that you mentioned earlier.
I think so.
So I would say the four sort of topics that we have really hit on the most during this call would be feeling different, the afterlife conversation or death, betrayal, and there's also, we haven't really talked about it much, but your interest in the work that goes behind the FX work. And one of our last questions that we normally ask is, so why horror? Because couldn't you delve into those topics in other genres? For example, FX works, there's sci-fi, betrayal, drama. I mean, there's that kind of thing is in a lot of movies. The afterlife, that's also in a fair number of other movies. Feeling different, I don't know. I mean, again, it depends on how different you want to be. I guess that's possibly the strongest for contender in horror that I see of these four, that one really, you can't get as different in other genres as you do horror. But how do you feel about those four things in comparison to horror versus other genres?
Yeah, I think that the most interesting part of any genre is the horror aspect. I think that there are horror aspects to pretty much every genre, but being able to take all of that and put it in one place. Like, yeah, there's fantasy movies. I love fantasy movies. I love sci-fi movies. I also love When Harry Met Sally, but there's not a lot of horror to that. Love and sex and death and rebirth and demons and angels and monsters and things from other places and all that stuff. Horror really has the most license to explore those topics.
Considering the theme of the podcast, is there anything that you're aware of that's relevant that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, did we miss anything?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, yeah.
Ask a different question. Being that you mentioned that you've listened to some of these others and other episodes and maybe had some thoughts in mind, was there something that you were really looking forward to sharing or discussing that you haven't talked about?
how do I say this? So my like filmmaking company, right, kind of imploded, self-destructed in its way, and there were some deep feelings of betrayal there, you know. So it's something that still continues to plague me. All of these things that we've talked about, I haven't moved past these fears because there's still things that happen on a too regular of a basis, you know. You know, my biggest demon is procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have to do this, but I don't want to, and I'm going to procrastinate on it. So maybe I can do something else while I'm waiting to do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
But
The plague
I think
of
most of our
multitasking.
listeners will identify with that. Yes.
yeah.
Speaking of the listeners,
Hi.
is there anything that you? Yeah. Hello. Would you anything you'd like to pitch to them before we close the call? Because I mean, unless you disagree, I think, as I said earlier, I think the four things that we would summarize for you were the feeling different, concern about the afterlife, betrayal, and then your interest in FX work, which we haven't really talked too much because I don't think that there might be something emotional tied in with that, but I think the other three are definitely stronger in the sense of how you relate to them emotionally. Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, there are, but I guess there's an engineering aspect to that, that, falls behind all of the,
But I still see it as a response to those three things, not
well, I want to
the
make
core
those
itself.
things.
But again, it's a response to what you see of those other things, not the core itself. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know either.
I'm
I thought
not.
that's what this was for. Anyway.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I don't know. I'm not certified. I'm just fucking winging this shit.
Hey, you wrote a book.
Hey,
That's certification.
You wrote a book, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done decades of personal introspection and counseling and that kind of shit. So, I mean, I'm not coming at it completely off the wall, but I'm not a PhD either. So,
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not either, but I play one on TV.
here's our aspirin or whatever it was, Tylenol, acetaminophen. So yeah, going back to the, did you want to pitch something?
Leah Taylor and I are working on a project, but I guess right now the best thing to do is check for my Instagram. Keep up on with me on my website. I will be working on that more. Just follow me through my Instagram, and which is Arthur L. Cullipher, and arthurcullipher.com, and read some crazy shit.
Yeah, and we'll put together a bio package for you, or bio page for you, and we can link to all that stuff from our page. So if anybody doesn't have pen and paper to write it down or can't remember it, I mean, Arthur Cullipher is pretty easy to remember, but
and also, if you've got an acting job and you think I might be good for it, let me know. I love acting.
And if they've seen your work, they might be listening to this podcast. So you never know.
There you go.
It's worth a shot.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Absolutely.
Pleasure
Thank you,
having
guys.
Yeah, thanks for popping by. It's been awesome.
All right.
Thank you to anybody out there listening. Please, again, do come visit us over at horrormakesushappy.com. I've said this spiel probably 40 times. Fuck it, I'm skipping it. Have a good day.
You all know we got the Patreon.
Yeah.